I definitely want to start in LA where those pesky Clippers, man, put up a pretty, I mean, they scored 93 points, which is a lot in today's hand checking allowed postseason, but they got walloped by 30 and the game was not particularly close. And I was speaking to one member of the Mavericks organization earlier in the week before this game, and the thought to me was definitely that they were going to be, the word was pace. And then sure enough, they start with Kyrie having the ball in his hands, and Reggie Miller is talking about how they're trying to run the tempo up and push the pace all game long. And I felt like the word pace was like a drinking game for me specifically on the couch last night because Jamal Crawford kept saying it. But yeah, the Mavericks turned this into a track meet and the Clippers could not make a fucking shot. And this game and the series is heading back to Dallas now with the Mavericks looking like they're in pretty good position to take this thing.
Yeah, I mean, 123-93 is the largest loss, like the most lopsided loss in Clippers playoff history, which you start to feel like, well, that means something given how rocky the Clippers history is. But this is like, it clears the bar if they got to the playoffs. So it's not like the worst loss overall in Clippers history, but in the postseason, it's a tough one. And one of the biggest wins in Mavericks postseason history. And I think, our super producer, John Gennaro, noted in our docs here, like not our docs, we're not doxing anybody with our rundown. The story of the game was the Dallas defense. And that's really, it's what it's been since the trade deadline, really, right? I mean, the moves that they made to bring in Daniel Gafford, bring in PJ Washington, be able to play with more size all the time has dramatically sort of altered what this team could be. They held the Clippers to a 90.2 offensive rating in Game 5, according to Cleaning the Glass. That is
Damn, what would that rank season-wise?
I'm about to tell you, Jake. It would be the worst Clippers offensive performance of the whole season. Like they have not scored less efficiently this year. It would be the Clippers' worst postseason offensive game since Game 4 of the 2021 Western Conference Finals against Phoenix. So going back 3 years, it's the worst playoff offense that they've played. And you could say part of that is obviously Kawhi Leonard's not there. They also haven't had Kawhi Leonard for most of the last few postseasons either. So, this is even grading against the curve. It was a really rocky one. And if you're looking anywhere to start with in terms of the way the Clippers offense fell apart, you've got to look at the stars who were on the court. And the one who's going to get the most attention, the most headlines is James Harden.
It definitely will, especially after he was like a pseudo hero and the Game 4 flipping floaters in left and right. And this has been the James Harden playoff experience, though, throughout his entire career. He's putting up 40 against Boston in Game 1 and then doing an absolute dud a season ago. And I think the scary hours for the Clippers here is...
What a renewable resource that phrase has been. Several teams now, it really works pretty much. Any container you need to put it in, it'll fit.
We could use that for the system, too. The system wasn't exactly humming last night.
System was down. Shouts out to the cheat and Homestar Runner.
We need the IT department to come get that system back up. IT is not Isaiah Thomas. He's out, too. I think...
If there's one thing Steve Ballmer should have, it's an IT department on hand, right? You should figure...
You would think. I think, ultimately, last night, no matter what, the Clippers are not winning if Paul George and James Harden aren't making shots. That's pretty straightforward. To me... It just kind of seemed like they don't know what to do if those guys aren't feeling good at all. Like, there's one thing if they're just like getting good looks and they're not falling. But when you start to see hesitancy and I couldn't count them because I wasn't in the arena cross-checking all the play-by-play and was just also like half, locked in when you're on the couch.
Sure.
Countless times, to me, I'm sure someone could count them, how many driving kicks just went like 3 feet too far to the right to the shooter. And Terrence Mann was typically the one on the receiving end of that stuff. I felt bad for Terrence Mann. Terrence Mann was just doing what he could do out there, man. I think it was like pretty abundantly clear the lack of shooting that the Clippers have when Kawhi isn't in the rotation. And the Amir Coffee kind of like short rolly guy is great, but then like off the bench, your 8-man rotation, just including Mason Plumlee and Russell Westbrook, when Russ turns into a pumpkin, I mean, that there was this one sequence that really stood out to me in that last second quarter sprint that Dallas used like a 10-2 run to take a pretty commanding double-digit lead into the half. Like at the 2-minute mark, the Clippers had the ball for basically the whole minute. And it's James in pick and roll doing what he does. He completely misses Russ for the cross-court alley-oop coming down the baseline on the dunker spot that like tore the house down in game 4. And then the ball swings back out to Harden in the corner, and he's just kind of dribbling between his legs with no daylight at all. It gets to Russ on the wing. He's no threat to shoot at all. And Mason Plumlee is an absolute zero when he's not having a clear runway to the rim. They got 3 offensive rebounds for nothing, and the second the Mavericks finally got the ball, Kyrie took 2 dribbles and threw a half-court lob to Daniel Gafford. Right. And to me, that was like a perfect encapsulation of what this game was, where Dallas was trying to get out, and they were defending. Kyrie and Luka getting down in stances and being in these guys' faces has been some of the most fun part of the playoffs for me to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right to focus in on with like the Russell Westbrook, the Mason Plumlee, the Terrence Mann, the Amir Coffee. Like the Clippers have these guys who need things created for them. Like Russell Westbrook to a lesser extent, but he's a more contingent player now than he ever has been. And what you see is when James Harden is able to be the system, when he's able to get downhill, draw help, and he's making shots early, and the threat of him knocking shots down, it pulls the defense in. That opens up the space and the opportunities for those other guys. Paul George is not, I mean, he's a very credible playmaker, but he's not the guy who's going to put the ball like, I figure out how the guy likes the lines up, likes the lines on the ball when he catches it, and it's going to be in the shooting pocket, on time, on target, perfectly ready to go every time. He's not that kind of playmaker. Harden is. So if you are able to throw some sand in the gears of his operation early, which I love that you mentioned Kyrie's defensive stance. Like, I think first possession of the game, he's pressuring Harden like full court. He's making sure he's like fighting over the top of screens. It's ball pressure. I'm like pushing you out on your catch further out. Like setting a tone, which is not something we would often attribute to Kyrie Irving defensively, but that was the way that they attacked Harden all night. Everybody was sort of game plan disciplined with the way they were shading. Obviously, you want him to get to his right hand, but don't just give him the red carpet. Like make him feel you. The help was ready on time, but getting Harden out of his rhythm early pays major dividends down the line because all those guys rely on Harden to pump the blood through the offense. And if he's not doing that, then where is the shot creation coming from? And what you saw is there was about a quarter and a half of the Clippers could keep afloat with that. And then just the bottom absolutely fell out of the offense because none of those guys were getting the service that allows them to be their best. And they weren't able to create on their own. And you weren't getting you had Paul George and James Harden in quicksand. And some of that is just like the Clippers lacking the requisite shot creation and shot making talent. But a lot of it is like the Mavs forced that to happen. Derrick Jones Jr. was like star performance in terms of his defensive work on Paul George in that game. Absolutely. Kyrie deserves a ton of credit. Luka playing through the sprained knee in the cold, like still digging in defensively. Those guys locked in. They didn't let the job get done. Like, oh, well, I got blown past once or I got beat off the screen once. Game over. Like PJ Washington coming to swat the James Harden layup from behind. Kyrie getting over there and poking the ball out from behind. Multiple efforts on these defensive possessions. It's not who the Mavericks typically have been, but it's who they've been since the trade deadline. And it's a big reason why they're one game away from the second round.
I also think it's so interesting that Luka clearly prefers to walk the dog all the way up the court and check the weather and see the breeze, and then 9 seconds left on the clock, call up a big man, and then go to work. And people on the Mavs have just been saying all year long that when they're playing with pace, again, take a drink, that they have just a different level of offense. And it was most sharp, I think, in their internal evaluations, seeing Dante Exum come off the bench and just get downhill and drive and kick and get the ball pinging around the perimeter and all that type of stuff. This game, there's no real way to like quantify it. To me, there was like an ineffable, palpable, they're doing both at the same time. Like they were getting it up the floor and getting into stuff. And then, all right, there's nothing here. Let's just Kyrie's swinging it over to Luka and he's calling up Gaffer or Lively or whoever, and they're getting something going. So I do wonder if this is one of those series where like it's 2-2, just like Denver Phoenix last year, where it's 2-0 Denver. The Suns figured some stuff out, then Denver just whopped them for the last couple games. Not exact same format here, but I do kind of wonder if the Mavs, especially with Kawhi out, if the Mavs have just kind of figured out what they need to do here. And we'll see if that occurs in Game 6 on Friday.
Yeah, obviously a big part of adjusting the sliders there would be the Clippers can't survive another 7 points from Harden and 15 points from Paul George. Harden in particular is obviously the one to keep the closest eye on. You mentioned that this is a very familiar script at this point for Harden, going back last season in Philly, the 2 monster performances with Embiid out, but then the whisper quiet other ones. 2 of 12 shooting, which Nick Wright, former guest for Vinny Goodwill, noted this on Twitter. He surfaced this stat, which is kind of wild. Harden now holds the NBA record for most playoff games with 10 or more field goal attempts and 2 or fewer makes. That was his 10th game like that in the playoffs, which is a lot. And the question, the issue is always like, well, when it gets hard, when the chips are down, what will the response be? And from Dylan Hernandez of the Los Angeles Times, quote, as Harden walked down the hallway leading from the locker room to the players' parking lot, he was approached by Times reporter Broderick Turner, who asked him if he would stop by the interview room. Harden mouthed no and continued on his way out. So you go from whisper quiet to not even whispering on the way out of the building. And that's a tough look. And now you need significantly better on the road in your backs against the wall elimination game. He is capable of that. Paul George is capable of that, the shot making. But I think the thing that you sort of noted, Dallas being a team that now can make it hard on you. And then when you make it hard on them, they still have the lock picks. They still have the answers. They can play with pace. They can get ahead of the sticks. But also, like, they finally got Luka, even through the ailment and the illness, like looking like Luka. And a big part of that was just he's been such a pile driver getting downhill, a battering ram at the paint. 25 drives last night, 9 for 12 from the floor on those drives, 5 assists coming out of his pass outs, dunks, threes, like the lob threats and the kickouts, the driving kick. The corner threes were a huge part of it. Maxi Kleba, I believe, made 4 corner threes, 5 total. Like, you get those role player games out of what you create from your stars. The Mavs stars created those opportunities. Guys like Kleba and Derek Jones Jr. I think Josh Green made a corner 3 too. Like, those guys cashed out. Yeah.
4-point play. Mason Plumlee.
So, they cash out on those opportunities. The Clippers stars need to create those for the Mavs. Otherwise, they're going to be heading home. And heading home in the first round at this stage where James Harden's hitting unrestricted free agency, Paul George still has not signed that extension. You're opening up the $1 billion toilet dome. Like, there's a lot going on. Everybody in the world seems to want Ty Lue to coach their team, but he can only coach one of them. It's a lot on the line for the Clippers heading into Game 6 in Dallas.